Hey there, Eli again, coming at you from OSA in Coventry, covering one of the most important aspects for the beginner saltwater aquarist that shops at our store, and that is saltwater fish acclimation. So when you're shopping at our store, in our fish system in the fish room, the saltwater fish are actually not kept at full strength salinity. So for most of your aquariums, especially if you run a reef tank, you're going to run a salinity somewhere around 1.024 to 1.027 specific gravity. Whereas with our fish system, we run a lot lower salinity. Running a lower salinity helps us to avoid running into issues with saltwater ick in our system. And it helps promote overall fish health. When these fish are crammed and when these fish are stressed from being shipped, it's a little bit easier to house them at these lower salinities. It's less stressful than keeping them at high salinities. As well, a lot of these fish are actually shipped at quite a low salinity to us when we receive them. So this helps to mitigate the stress when these fish are brand new to our location here. So in our fish room, the salinity for those fish systems is 1.018 generally, but it should be within a point or two of that. For this sake, acclimating nice and slow when you get home is very important to make sure that you don't shock your fish by taking them from this low salinity and throwing them to full strength saltwater in your aquarium. A couple things that are kind of important to keep on hand for your new fish would be one being a fish net for safe transfer of the fish, as well as some sort of drip line. So for a lot of people, just a piece of airline tubing is enough to suffice. And throwing a quick knot in the end helps to regulate how fast your water is going to drip from this. I like to use these little airline valves, which kind of are a little bit easier to work with in terms of setting up your drip. But basically, when we're acclimating our saltwater fish, we want to drip our tank water from our tank into a bucket that contains the fish. So emptying your fish into a nice clean bucket or a nice catch container when you first get them home, and then setting up your line, perhaps with a little clip or something to your aquarium, and starting a small siphon with this tubing into the bucket. You want to aim for about 2 to 4 drips per second, something that's going to slowly add some of your tank's water into the bucket to increase the salinity over time in the bucket. With the drip method, you also mitigate the need for floating your bags. So if you only have a short ride, maybe 30, 45 minutes home from the shop, you might not need to float your bag when you get home. But say your fish has sat in the car a little bit longer, or it's taking you a little extra long to get home, you do still want to probably float your bag for 30 minutes, 45 minutes before starting the drip acclimation process to make sure that the water temperature inside of the bag is pretty close to your aquarium temperature. However, if you did have a short drive, like I mentioned earlier, starting your drip right away, there's nothing wrong with that when you get home. And basically, you want to keep this drip going for about 30-45 minutes in this bucket, and the goal is to kind of double your water volume in this bucket in that time period. So ideally, you want to be as close salinity matched before you throw your fish into your tank, but again, being within a couple degrees should not be too stressful. You want to avoid these large swings from the low salinity to the high salinity. So once you are done with your drip, again, breaking out your handy dandy fish net and gently scooping your fish out of the bucket and transferring him into the tank. You want to minimize as much of the fish water that's going into your tank to help to avoid getting any water from this fish system into your aquariums. As much as we trust our fish system to be very clean, you always want to mitigate the transfer of any sort of pathogens or bacterias or anything from our water to your water, just as a good precaution. Another important thing to consider when keeping saltwater aquariums is actually quarantining your fish, which is not a topic I'm really going to hit today, but perhaps for a future video. And that is definitely a very good thing to keep in mind, especially if you have a really big, nice reef tank like you see at our shops, where you have a lot of money invested in fish, a lot of money invested in corals, and you don't want to run the risk of getting your fish sick. Keeping a smaller tank as a quarantine setup is a very important thing to consider when adding fish to your aquarium. As always, thank you guys for watching. You can let us know if you have any questions or requests for future videos in the comments, and keep on reefing.